Welcome to the February 2nd edition of the PFF Forecast. We are remote once again. My voice slowly recovering. The lighting only slightly better on my end. I'm doing everything I can, folks. We've got a really fun show. We are going to talk. There's a lot of news that has gone on. We're going to hit kind of all of these a little bit briefly. We're going to talk about Tom Brady retiring twice in 4 days. And we'll talk a little bit about the Brian Flores thing. There's a lot obviously to unpack there from every angle. And then we're going to close it out with, of course, some Super Bowl. We've got some props that are live. We're going to talk about our favorite ones there. We're also, of course, going to do our special Super Bowl props when those get released later. So don't worry, plenty of Super Bowl props coming. Let's rock. All right. I was going to make a joke about paying you money to throw the podcast, but I couldn't really get it to come together. So I'm just going to tell everyone that I was thinking about it and I tried.
I could be like Hugh Jackson and just really suck at the podcast. Then years later, tell everybody I was being paid to do it bad.
See, like, little did I know that
this is such like a good bit, right? So like I tweeted out like, let's pay Kyle Shanahan $100K to go for fourth downs. Let's pay.
Yeah, that would hit a little close to home.
Let's pay Sean McVay $100,000 to take a delay of game penalty instead of taking a timeout in the first half. What are some other good ones? Pay Eric $100K to say something nice about the Vikings.
Yeah. What about paying Patrick Mahomes $100,000 to complete a pass more than 2 yards downfield in the second half?
That's hurtful. That's hurtful, truthful, hurtful, though.
What are some other good ones? You could pay the New Orleans Saints to just stay where they're at in the draft and not hemorrhage.
You could pay the New Orleans Saints $100,000 not to spend $200,000.
That's smart. All right, we'll get to the Brian Flores stuff in a little bit because that's kind of a meatier conversation. There's a lot going on there. I just want to get your thoughts briefly on the Brady thing. I really did kind of believe that he was going to come back, that just the way that he is wired, he was preparing to scorn everyone, or not everyone, but to prove, Schefter wrong or whatever, and just come back and do it again. But part of that was based on the fact that from a data standpoint, and I think from an eye standpoint as well, that he's playing as well as he's ever played, like back-to-back great seasons. And I just can't imagine, like personally, if I'm that good at something, not wanting to do it every day. And I know that I'm not a professional athlete. I don't know if that was my thought. And I still can't totally get that out of the way. Like being that good at something that you would just not want to do it anymore. But that's really my big takeaway from it. And I'm like kind of shocked. It's honestly something that I would not have expected from anybody. And maybe that's the greatness of Tom Brady, that he's able to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, I actually get it. I mean, I think
really
as somebody so there's a couple things. Like as somebody who's like changed careers before, like there is that aspect of like, once you've already decided, or like, there's been moments in my life, like one was in my football career where I was just like, I need to finish out this season, but I could never imagine myself playing another year. Like I had that sort of experience where my last
Are you making a comparison between
No, I'm not making a comparison.
Playing football and Tom Brady because
no, I'm just saying like the football is a very violent game. It's extremely hard to play. And like I think that there are people who decide at some point saying like, look, this is my last year. And then because the football, they don't tank, right? They play as hard as they can, but they see the finish line, right? And then the idea of like for Tom Brady, and like, again, this isn't to compare because no one playing college or most players in the NFL don't work nearly as hard as Brady. But the idea of getting up every day and working as hard on it as Brady, when you're not like, it's a long task. So I think that part of it is just like at some point you lose it in your mind and you're just like, I can't. And he said it as much as his press conference. He's like, this is something to, to point out. But the other one is the way in which the league is structured. You think about this. Tom Brady is going to retire and will probably be, subject to any sort of noise. The most successful football player in the history of the league. And how did he do it? Well, he did it not by rigging the game, but by taking advantage of the nuances that are in the game. So a 16-game schedule and 2 byes in the conference every single year. Tom Brady played one less playoff game than all but one quarterback for 2000. So they got the bye 2001, 2003, 2004, 2007, 2010, 11. Like they got the bye every single year from 2010 to 2018. And how did they win the Super Bowl last year? They won the Super Bowl in sort of Cinderella fashion. 16 games, 5 seed, 3 road games, win the Super Bowl. And there must be a part of him that sort of looks at what happened this year, which was you got to play 17 games. And that 17th game, you got to grind it out really hard just to get a 2 seed. And that 2 seed doesn't even get you a bye. So there's 2 extra games a year for Brady to win the Super Bowl every year now. And like, I think that is part of like the calculus of like, this is just not as easy anymore. And like, again, he's super competitive. I think it just all adds up, right? Like for men like Brady, there just can't be doubts in your brain, can there?
That's interesting. So I was kind of thinking about his motivation in a kind of parallel, but different way. And it was, he has dealt with a lot of drama throughout his time as an NFL player. And that didn't slow down at all in Tampa Bay. He was the lone consistent part of that team, right? Like there were things that were continuously going on there, whether it be injuries, whether it be Antonio Brown. And I think he realized that he obviously had nothing left to prove, right? And he was going to keep going out there and being great. And he's played, I think he realized, like, I'm playing as well as I've ever played. And even so, I am subject to so much of this randomness. That means I can play this well. I can be the best quarterback in the league, and I can have to scratch and claw to win 1 Super Bowl in 2 years. I can do the same thing next year. And like, what are the chances? And is it something that feels like the right challenge? Because the challenge, I think, for him at this point wasn't playing better. It was like getting the team to figure it out, getting Antonio Brown to figure it out, getting Gronk to come back, finding a way, for his tackle and center not to get hurt. Like those are things that are so hard to control. That can't be super fun. Like the fun part of it is being the best quarterback you can be and chasing something. He really doesn't have anything else to chase. And I actually think that it's very similar. And Romo made this comparison. At first I thought he was high, but then it started to make sense. He compared it to Jordan. And I think there's a chance he comes back. I got to be honest with you, because he's so good. But I think it got to the point where he is more challenged by other things in his life. And that's what he lives for, is like seeing a challenge and going and getting after it. I mean, he started a clothing brand. He's, all about crypto, and like he has an NFT brand that he supports. He clearly has a lot of motivation.
This guy's into a lot of dumb shit now.
He's into a lot of some interesting stuff, but like also think about this. His wife is more successful than he is as a worldwide human because of what she's done, like in the real world, right? I say the real world, meaning not his world. I think that's an interesting challenge. So it does start to make sense from a personal level. It just still makes it so hard for, I think, anyone to comprehend, because no one can say, oh yeah, I've been the greatest at the coolest thing imaginable. And it's gotten to the point where that's no longer like a huge challenge for me, I think is insane.
Yeah, I think, and it's also to me, these men are, I think, mostly fairly judged by how many Super Bowls they win. But, when he looks around and he sees how noisy it is, right? He looks at Aaron Rodgers winning 1 ring since 2010. He looks at even like the Chiefs after a 1 ring, 2 loss, 2 seasons where they've gotten less far in the playoffs since. Josh Allen, he looks at Josh Allen going 0 for 2, right? Or 0 for 3 playoffs, 0 for 2 the last 2 years in seasons where, you could argue that the Bills are the best team. I think also a lot of these men want the world to be more deterministic than it is. And Brady, who's been, and I mean this in the best way, but Brady, who has had fortune shine on him more than any athlete in the NFL history, probably doesn't want to go through a few more years of being the best player and what that entails without it paying off. And it's just like with the new playoff format and the quarterback he's going to face in the AFC Super Bowl, if he even makes it, I can see him just looking at it and being like, I took down, like, think about this. He's like, I took down Patrick Mahomes, right? In his last hurrah. John Elway went out. So this is, you think about this, like, somebody asked me on the radio, they were saying, is this the best retirement since John Elway in 1998? Elway 0-3 in the Super Bowls, got to the end, won 2 in a row. And in many ways, very similar to Brady, because, everybody was crowning Brett Favre as the next best thing, right? Favre had just won a Super Bowl over Drew Bledsoe and the New England Patriots. They're 14-point favorites against Denver in the Super Bowl, and John Elway slays them, right? And then Brett Favre never gets back, right? Patrick Mahomes, kind of everybody's bee's knees, had just won a Super Bowl. Brady slays him, plays another great year, retires. Like, there's part of it, like, we look at Big Ben's end of his career, terrible. Brett Favre's end of his career, terrible. Peyton Manning, now he won a Super Bowl. It's kind of weird, right? So Manning,
he was benched for Brock Osweiler.
Eli Manning was terrible for the last 5 or 6 years of his career. Tony Romo got hurt on his way out. There's part of that too. Just going out being like, look, I can still play. There's no question I can still play. And everybody's a little sad I'm gone. No one's sad Big Ben's gone. No one.
You had to throw some strays there. I want to talk Brian Flores here. Before we do, there is a promo that you guys have to know about, which is on pff.com. Use the promo code SUPER25 and get 25% off any PFF subscription. That's right.
You had such a missed opportunity here with it. You have to put the point shaving story next to the Manscaped read. I
see what you're. Yeah, look, you buried the lead here. I was going to do that on the way out. Okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I'm sure people will forget by the time we get there, so it's not a big deal. Don't worry. But 25% off on any PFF subscription at pff.com. That means you can get the Edge subscription, which gives you all of PFF's locked article content, plus all of the fantasy tools, our rankings, because that, I got to be honest with you, it's coming up soon. Or the PFF Elite subscription, which is a little bit more expensive, but it's super worth it because you get NFL and NCAA betting dashboards. NFL Greenline is crushing in the playoffs, so go check that out. Plus the player props tool just in time for the Super Bowl. We're going to have a ton of new props in there, Super Bowl only, that you'll want to come check out, like anytime touchdown, all that fun stuff. So it's a great time to go get that subscription. And if you like the draft, the NFL draft guide is out. All those good, wonderful things with promo code SUPER25 at pff.com. Go make it happen. I lied. I actually wanted to ask you quickly about Harbaugh. I don't think we need to talk about this at time because it hasn't been official yet. But yeah, I mean, we've seen him. You've obviously watched more of his college games than I have. But like, obviously, I've observed him plenty in the NFL as well. Do you think that it's a worthwhile hire or worthwhile risk, I guess, for Minnesota?
I don't think so. I mean, I know you were on my Matthew Collar's show, and I want to go back and listen to that. For no other reason that there's always like a decent joke about me in the podcast where you go on my friend's shows.
Yep.
And it's always, those are my fave. Harbaugh to me was a great coach for the 2011 49ers. You know, the 2011 49ers, you know, you think about the Mike Nolan era, you think about the Mike Singletary era.
I don't actually.
And the as somebody who really liked those teams, not the coach, because they built such a great roster, and then you get Harbaugh coming in, and as you know, as a Niners fan, they were amazing right away, right? That team had players, right? Like Justin Smith, Aldon Smith, you know, you had Navarro Bowman, Patrick Willis, Dante Whitner. You had players on that team that were good. On the offensive side of the ball, you had Joe Staley, you had Alex Boone, you had amazing, you know, Vernon Davis. The Vikings don't have any players. You know, like I worry because it's a different beast, right? Like in some ways, what did Harbaugh do when he came into San Francisco? Alex Smith was sort of on the last leg of his contract, and they gave him kind of a really cheap deal and said, hey, you have one more chance to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. And there was a great roster around him. They ran that kind of run first offense. And it was a time when that run first offense was still, it was better to run it back then. It's increasingly worse as we go along. Kind of still runs that same thing in Michigan. Like Michigan, the Big Ten, you can kind of run that bully ball style of offense a lot better, you know, a lot more than you can in the NFL. And the Vikings just aren't that good. Like the Vikings have who? They have Jefferson. Cousins is a good quarterback, but it's a totally different situation than Alex Smith, right? Cousins is making $45 million if you keep him next year. And he's also kind of not a John Harbaugh quarterback. Like as much as you and I he's played for both of our favorite teams, would decry Alex Smith's ability. Alex was not a wuss, and Alex was not I just work your quarterback. He stuck his nose in there. He played hard. Kirk Cousins is like the exact opposite. He has more talent, but he's not a Harbaugh quarterback. And so
I think they're going to trade him.
I worry about Harbaugh's ability to build a roster. I don't.
But that's not his job.
But it is like it's Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's job to build the roster, but it's Jim Harbaugh. Sorry, you said John Harbaugh a few times. It's Jim Harbaugh's job to develop the players, right? And he did some of that in San Francisco, but a lot of those players were already good when he got there, and his job was to sort of make the meal out of all the great ingredients. In Minnesota, it's like you have Dalvin Cook. You probably should get rid of Dalvin Cook. You have Justin Jefferson, you have a couple tackles who are okay. You have Danielle Hunter, who's coming off of 2 straight season-ending injuries. Eric Kendricks was a 0 WAR player this year, and yet Harrison Smith. You don't have a good roster. And I worry that bringing Harbaugh in is going to bring a win now mentality that a team that's over the salary cap, that has to handle the Cousins situation, like they probably need a coach who is going to build the thing from the bottom up, and not somebody like Harbaugh who, and again, this is from what I know from talking. Right. Jim Harbaugh wants to be in the NFL because he wants out of Michigan, because that Michigan cut his salary in half, right? Like Jim Harbaugh would coach the Dolphins if they wanted him to. Jim Harbaugh would coach the Giants if they wanted. This idea that he wants he wants the Vikings because the Vikings have shown interest in him. That is it. Like this is not, he would have coached the Raiders if they wanted him. So this is a situation where Minnesota. What's that?
Well, I don't get that point though. Like, what is that?
Like Harbaugh's a desperate man right now, and I think that the issue that
is not every single person that's not coaching in the NFL desperately wanting to coach in the NFL.
I don't know. I mean, I think some people would
like how many NFL. What about Matt Rule?
Matt Rule, his penultimate year before going to the Panthers, was courted by NFL teams and kept his job at Baylor. And then by the time
but he's not a smart man.
As far as getting a head coaching job in the NFL, yes, he is. He waited out 1 year and created a bidding war between the Panthers and the Giants. Right, his contract is finesse Hall of Fame.
You think that was strategic? That's called getting lucky.
Okay, but
I don't think
I
it's
don't-
fair to imbue. I don't think it's fair to say that like it's a bad hire because he wants to coach in the NFL and he would
No, but what I'm
consider.
saying, if you're the Vikings, and again, I'm going to try because I ultimately will probably trust what Kwesi Adofo-Mensah does because I think he's extremely smart and he's worked with Harbaugh before, so there's not a naivete there at all. But I just don't know if the Vikings are in the right phase of their rebuild for a guy like Jim Harbaugh. That's my point. Like
I have a counter take. Okay. So Harbaugh has spent the past however many years in college. Okay. And he's been dealing with a lot of kids. And what's interesting about Harbaugh, Eric, is that he's not your typical like kind of retread coach. Like Harbaugh is a guy at heart who is young, who is liked by younger players, who has an intensity and a competitiveness that is weird to see liked so much, I think, by a younger generation, where like that I think has kind of phased out a little bit. And I'm not saying that it's not really risky, but I think there's a part of it that could make the risk worth the reward, which is to say, we need someone who people will respect the way that they build culture. Now, there's a huge caveat there, which is, okay, who are his assistants? Who's going to actually create that offense? Is that offense going to be something that's from this century? Those are all things that I'm assuming a GM of Kwesi's caliber, as you know, the person that we know, is going to check. But when I look around at the other coaches out there, and I thought Brian Flores was one of the few, I do think you're taking a huge risk from a culture building perspective, right? Like you bring Kellen Moore in, you're taking a huge risk on what that guy is as a manager and a leader. And I'll say this about the Vikings. Like Mike Zimmer knew what he was doing defensively. They really didn't exude great culture, right? Like Stephon Diggs.
It was a joke. Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, that it's just because that is something that is harder to measure empirically with the data that we have access to, it doesn't make it not important. And I think it's a risk, right? It's obviously a risk. But I'm saying I think that one of the reasons that it is potentially worthwhile is you have a team that desperately needs that. You do have talent offensively. Justin Jefferson is a special talent. I think there's enough teams out there that are desperate for a quarterback where you could get something from Kirk Cousins and you could go out and draft, a young guy and try him out, or you could keep Kirk Cousins and draft a young guy as well and see how that goes. But I think it's unfair. I think it's a little unfair for us to. Like,
George, are you getting this this news? So this is from Adam Schefter 4 minutes ago. Jim Harbaugh called Michigan to inform the school that despite interviewing with the Vikings today, he will be returning to school for the 2022 season, sources tell ESPN. Michigan was, in the words of one source, by the way, Schefter, a Michigan alum, elated to get Harbaugh's decision.
Man, it was like 53 pages long. There's a ton of kind of headline material there. Maybe let's start at the beginning with, some of the hiring components, right? So there's the Denver Broncos, and then all of a sudden gets to, the most near-term thing, which is the New York Giants and Bill Belichick. I'm not sure if it was that Bill Belichick, Brian Flores instead of Brian Dable, or that he was actually just like, he was talking to someone of the Giants. Some of the Giants was like, yeah, Brian got the job. And he's like, oh, it must be Flores. And like accidentally texted Brian Flores when that was. But starting there, like my concern is that not that what he's saying is inaccurate. I think it's accurate. I think it's ridiculous for people to think that he made that up and that just to take teams at their word. That is bananas to me. My concern, Eric, is who else is going to come forward on this? Because if not, If not, then I worry he's going to get steamrolled. The league is going to do what the league is going to do, right?
Well, but I think so, and we're getting flashbacks to the Colin Kaepernick situation
Exactly
back in 2016. But I think there are two differences, and I think the differences are extremely important. The first difference, the first difference is that we've been through this before, right? We've seen it's documented now what the league will do or what the collective will do to somebody who steps up and does something like this, right? The other difference, and I think this is extremely important, Brian Flores acknowledged in when he came out with this yesterday, he acknowledged that this could very well end his coaching career. This is something where he knows the risks that are on the line. He already has Kaepernick as an example. And I agree with you. Like, who else came out with Kaepernick? It was Eric Reed, right? And he had a hard time getting a job for a while. And, so we saw that. I think with Flores, he probably has a lot more things documented than Colin Kaepernick had. And that's going to, I think, bode extremely well for his case. Now, Hugh Jackson, coming out and trying to be a part of it and kind of screwing up is going to hurt them. But like progress is bumpy, right? There are going to be bad actors when you try to make progress. But make no mistake, I'm inclined to believe Brian Flores. And I know that might irritate some people, but we're not that many decades away from people throwing melons out of a stand at Warren Moon when he was the first black quarterback to really gain prominence in the NFL. We're not that far away. Art Shell and Dennis Green, we talk about Dennis Green took over the Minnesota Vikings in 1992. I can't remember when Art Shell did. That was the first black coach in 1992. The idea that we're backsliding from this, these decades of progress is freaking silly, right? We're still on the very cutting edge of trying to make the league a more representable place for the players and for culture in general. We've all had those experiences. When I played, there were coaches who straight up would say don't invite so-and-so to this dinner or whatever. It was like that. And, people like us, we were kids not that long ago. Right. So there's a ton of prejudice within the league, and the people who are making these decisions were well grown by the time they started owning the teams, and well grown by the time that these things were normal. This idea that folks like us who have sort of lived through some of the cultural evolutions that we've seen, a lot of the owners in the NFL haven't, right? They've been rich for a long time, and they've been, they've been able to apply these prejudices and longstanding inequalities for a long time. And this idea that, I commend him for taking notes, and I commend him for being willing to give up his own career, because he doesn't have to, right? I think that's the hard part, is that no one is going to blame an African-American coach for just going along with it and wanting to be one of 32 right. for 5 or 6 years. None of us would judge that person. Well, it takes a lot of courage.
That's the thing that frustrates me, is I've seen some people kind of insinuating that, oh, he's doing this because he realized that, he wasn't going to get another job, and he's pissed off because he didn't get the Giants job, and, and there's not as much interest in him as, he wanted, and he's bitter because the Dolphins fired him. And, look, I don't know if people are not putting this in context, but he could go be a defensive coordinator and for 2 years, be great, and go get a head coaching job. He could absolutely do that 100% and make a lot more money than he is likely to make by many times over.
The argument is silly to begin with, because if black head coaches were treated right, then yes, they wouldn't have like everybody who was saying, hey, look, I was treated poorly wouldn't have anything to point to. Like,
Right.
Of course it's going to be a guy who was just fired who's going to come forward. Like, because, like that whole thing is silly. Like, or of course it's going to be somebody who was treated poorly who's going to come forward, because if they weren't treated poorly, we would likely not have the problems we have. Right. Like,
yeah, that's fair. But by the way, the thing that was most obviously true about what he said, I mean, I believe it all, to be honest, because like I don't know how you're making that up, but the Broncos thing.
Yes. Well, no. Remember the Steelers Miami game that we bet on? We had Miami plus 14.5, and that coverage that they ran at the end of the first half.
Mm-hmm.
That's $100,000 check coverage, I feel like.
Fair. But the Broncos immediately giving a detailed summary of how they were on time to the meeting. that really nailed it for me. That he was spot on there.
Well, the whole thing, and like again, people are going to say, why do we even do this? Just hire the best person for the job. And there's a few reasons that are even more fundamental than what we're saying, because and you look at coaching staffs around the league, and there's nothing wrong with Bill Belichick's son wanting to coach. There's nothing wrong with Mike Zimmer's son wanting to coach. But the way the inequality happens at the very beginning of hiring, right? Because if you're a quality control coach making almost no money, you're more likely to be able to accept that job if you come from better socioeconomic statuses, right? And you're more likely to accept that job if you're the son of a coach and you can just live in his basement rent free, right? And then 10 years later, of course you're more qualified than me or George are at the offensive coordinator job, because you got in at the very beginning. The question becomes, we try to solve this question of coaching at the very tip of the spear. In reality, it's very much at the handle, and it's not. And again, a lot of these things are not malice on the part of individuals. Like that's what I want to impart. It's societal aspects where we just don't ask the right questions when things are happening, right? And that's why the staff in Washington, it's like, oh, there's a Rivera on the staff, there's a Del Rio on the staff. It's harmless. It's like, yeah, but every time we don't give somebody who is underrepresented an opportunity at the bottom, they don't have those 10 years of experience when it comes to the time of being a head coach, right? That's the issue. And again, I'll just say, anybody who wants to say, oh, just give the best person the job, just point to Denver. Denver's coming to Brian Flores, John O is coming to Brian Flores' interview drunk. Like, you can say that's laughable.
I think hungover was the insinuation.
Okay. You can say that that's BS, but I'll raise you the hires that franchise has made over the last 3-4 years.
Do you even need the hires? Look at the quarterbacks they drafted. I mean, God, you need like people rushing to defend. That is unbelievable to me. No, I agree with every point that you just made, and I actually hadn't thought of it in the way that you just put it there, and we could do a whole podcast on this. I think everyone knows this by now. Like, this is very similar to education, right? Where you go, oh, let's go help kids in, less well-to-do communities get into college. It's like, well, you want to help them get into college? Go teach them in kindergarten.
Yeah, or feed them well in kindergarten. Like,
right. Well, yeah, I mean, that's the point. That's the point. When you go do that, when you see what that's about, you realize that it's not. Because this is what always really frustrated me is you go, well, people will be like, well, like why are they so far behind, reading and all this stuff? And it's like, do you realize the number of times that little inequities have piled up by the time that they get to high school? And so what someone does, if you don't have that context and you meet a group of people and you go, wow, like, gosh, I would have expected more from a kid that's 16, And it's like, you don't get it. You don't get all of the things that go into making someone appear as though they're smart or they've figured it out. And really what you need to do is like be able to untie yourself from that and believe that people can learn. The problem is that by the time a kid is 16 or 17, it's really fucking hard to overcome all of those things, right? And when you back it all the way up and you go look at a kid in kindergarten and you realize at that point, it's not about teaching them the ABCs to exactly what you said. It's so much more, right? It's exposing them to just things that will help them mature and feeding them a healthy meal and all those things. And it's kind of exactly what you're saying, which is like, how can you expect someone to all of a sudden jump 10 years worth of advantage in a year or 2 years? It's a good point.
But the thing I'll say, and this is where I want to offer an olive branch to, and look, I actually do think the league is doing a good job in some aspects. Like you look at it in today's National Girls and Women's in Sports Day, there are more women scouts than there ever have been. That scout, like if you look at, who's getting hired for GMs, it's scouts, right? It's Ryan Poles, straight out of getting cut from the Chicago Bears, who, carry the 14 years later is now the GM of the team, right? How do we get our first female GM in the NFL? Well, that person might end up having to be a scout, 15 years beforehand, right? That's the groundwork. And when you look at, like, there are some assistant coaches now on teams who are women, obviously, the Rooney Rule, right, is just like the Rooney Rule has as good of intentions, in my opinion, as a lot of like affirmative action programs do for colleges and stuff like that. The problem is, and this is where I have sympathy for people, there are truly racists out there, and that we're not even talking about them, but I have sympathy for people who are foot soldiers in this and who are given a task of trying to increase diversity and increase, equitability. And they're not given that great of a chance because of what we just talked about, which is at the very beginning, those are the inequalities they have nothing to do with. And at the very end, they're asked to move a mountain when they've already been baked into the cake. And to me, that's where I think I have some sympathy for people who are, in that hiring process, just because, again, it's not necessarily their fault. The sample is what it is.
The next part of this that was fascinating is the $100,000 per loss concept. I'm just going to ask you a very basic question. Is there a right way to tank?
Yes. Yes. It's this. Play Josh Rosen. Like, that team tanks so they play Josh Rosen. Like, so, and most teams.
But and is that a less wrong way, or is that a completely like okay way? Do you know what I'm saying?
Okay way. I don't have a problem with that. Right? Like, and it depends upon the team structure. Some general managers have control over the 53 and some don't. And the incentive for a general manager and a coach are different. General manager is to be, play. And, we talked to Thomas on this show a while back, Thomas Dimitrov, he had control of the 53 until he didn't. And then he did again. And like all this stuff. Like, if you're a general manager, essentially you can orchestrate a situation where you lose, right? Like, yeah. if that Dolphins team said, look, our quarterbacks are Josh Rosen, Luke Falk, and some other schmuck at quarterback, like that accomplishes it, right? And then you can get your head coach reps, you can get your offensive coordinator reps. I think the hard part is there's a basin after which it's so bad of quarterback play where you can't find out anything about your players, and then a tanked season is not great, right? But no, there's a difference between saying, hey, lose this game, and saying, hey, let's not play our best players. I think there's a little bit of play hard, coach hard, but I'm not giving you good enough players at the right positions to win games. I think there's daylight there.
So that was my initial thought. And then I thought about it a little more. And I was like, is that just a less wrong way? Because are you screwing over a bunch of other players? And I guess this was kind of my question, right? So you play Josh Rosen. Are you screwing over a bunch of players on that team who, if you played a better quarterback, have a better chance at being successful, later in their career? And so it's tough because so here's what I got to. Here's what I came to, Eric. I was like, the only morally acceptable way to tank is to have a Josh Rosen in every position and let them try and win football games.
Yeah. The problem is like, and I agree with that. The problem is that defeats the purpose of the tank because you can't get, we talk about the Bengals and how they went from 2-14 to now, and to go from 2-14 to Super Bowl, you're not going to have a perfect roster, right? That offensive line is probably the last frontier for them. They're going to use all their money this offseason to make it better. You can't go from like a replacement level. You can't, I'll be frank, you can't go from where Houston is right now to a contender in any meaningful time. I don't think. You do have to have good players on the team and you have to either sit them, right? But again, you can't sit, it's hard. And I sort of think you have to accept the variance. If you're the Dolphins, you have to accept the variance of what you got. Because here's the deal. No one's bitching about the Dolphins winning 5 games in 2019 if they take Herbert over Tua, right? And and we weren't the ones that said take Herbert over Tua. So I'm not saying just do what we said. No, I'm saying variance happens, right? And no one's think about this. The 2017 Bills, right? They trade Sammy Watkins in the preseason. They trade Ronald Darby in the preseason. I believe they trade Marcel Darius during the middle of the season. They fuck around. They go 9-7, right? And they make the playoffs. They lose to the Jags. They're still in rebuild mode. They just messed around and won games, right? To me, that was a tanking team, but they still won. And then the next year, okay, sure. They got to trade up for Josh Allen. That happens. But look, Josh Allen's way better than Baker Mayfield. And so noise happens, and I would say it's okay to tank. It's okay to not try to win the Super Bowl every year is my thing. And it's okay not to try to win your division every year. And it's okay. And I don't know where the line goes to saying it's okay not to try to win games, but
I think it's strategic, right? In other words, look, we empower you as a coach to go do the best for your players and win games. We're not going to be the Los Angeles Rams this year for all of these reasons. We don't have a quarterback. We don't, even if we were to get a quarterback, we don't think we have a strong enough roster. So, here's what we're doing, right? We don't have a very good team. That means we're going to be in a position to draft players. If we have an opportunity to make a trade to acquire more draft picks with the players we have, we're going to do that. Know that that's our strategy. We support you as a coach doing what you need to do as a leader of these guys. I mean, these guys' lives, and not just their lives, but a few short years of their life that they are hoping will propel them on to meaningful success for a lot longer in life. That's a lot, that's a lot on the line. I know not every player fully grasps that, but I think that was what kind of Brian Flores was so maybe pissed about is this is a huge opportunity for these guys. And you can't just take, it's such an important part of their lives. You can't just throw it away because, you haven't managed your team correctly. I think that's kind of what he was getting at.
Everybody has to be on the same page, right? To me, you have to, if you're going to trade Sammy Watkins, you're going to trade Reggie Ragland, you're going to trade Ronald Darby, then you got to tell your coach, look, coach, again, to me, it's about giving a coach a set of assets that they're comfortable with going into battle with, right? Yep. And from the Tua draft pick, Flores basically, what was the report was that Flores was not in on Tua, right? The entire thing just seemed asynchronous, right? It just seemed whatever they were doing, he was not on the right page with them. And that's really it, right? Like, and Hugh Jackson too. It looks like Hugh Jackson was just not in on the joke, right? That was the Cleveland Browns. And like, again, I think there's an admirable way to try to accumulate assets in the NFL that is not necessarily like, isn't like losing games on purpose, right? But is also not doing like what the Minnesota Vikings have done for the past few years, which is go 8-8 and leave yourself with kind of crap for the next year. So that's my take. It's an interesting question. I sort of do agree with you that you're ruining players' careers, but you're also ruining the ability for you to be able to evaluate your own talent.
Yeah. Look, my point is that I think there's no doubt about it that there is a way to improve your probability as a franchise of winning a Super Bowl. And one of those ways is to be a worse team as opposed to an okay team. But 100%, you've shown the math, right? It's so that is the pathway, right? And to getting into that top cluster of teams, but you've got to do so in a way that acknowledges the importance of the people's lives that you are supporting. And I think that's just obviously something that the Dolphins were, I guess, unable to do. Do you think, so let me ask you this. If you had to guess, so let's kind of assume, let's say Brian Flores is telling the truth. He was offered $100K from Stephen Ross. And Cameron Wolf reported that there are text messages between Greer and Flores that Flores has that support this claim, that there are other people that are unnamed sources that are corroborating hearing the conversation about the $100,000. So there's, and look, we'll see if that's actually true or not, but let's kind of assume that that was the case, that you did offer him $100K per loss. Over under, in your mind, on number of teams that have done something similar, right? Now we've seen not stuff that's like exactly similar, but like Bountygate was a thing. So like, but specifically money for losses. What do you put the over under at?
It's actually shockingly low, I think. Honestly.
I think so?
Yeah. There are so many times like the Packers when they could have gotten Aikman and won 2 dumb games in a row. The Vikings when they could have got Andrew Luck winning a dumb game and getting Adrian Peterson's ACL torn. 3.5 at most. Honestly.
3.5. I'm going over 3.5. And I'll say this, I just don't think they come out. And here's the reason. I think for a lot of, I think owners are probably a little bit more careful in those situations than Ross would be my take. So anyways, we have one more segment to get to. We're going to talk a few Super Bowl props. Before we do, we're talking about shaving a few dollars off of your bank account and a few points off the scoreboard. Shave a few of the unnecessary things off of your body with Manscaped and the Lawnmower 4.0.
No one has to pay George $100K to shave.
They pay me per loss of body hair. And that's how I've managed to accumulate a fortune, which I don't have. I'm kidding. Promo code PFF, 20% off plus free shipping. Make yourself the best you can be. I made up that tagline. How awesome is that? You're welcome, Manscaped. Get the Performance Package 4.0. And you can get the brand new Ultra Premium Body Wash. Again, I have not used it yet. When I do, I'll let you know. But I have used the Lawnmower 4.0. I traveled with it. Still works like an absolute dream after having, spent multiple plane flights in a little carry-on bag, which comes with the Performance Package 4.0, I might add. So use promo code PFF, get 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com. Also, if you're going to place some bets, we're going to talk about some right now, some props that are available at an official sports betting partner of the NFL, DraftKings, and the DraftKings Sportsbook. Counting down to Super Bowl 56, new customers using promo code PFF get 56-1 odds on any team. Just bet $5 and get 280 in free bets if your team wins. So go make that happen in time for the Super Bowl so you can spend all of those free bets on player props. If you don't live in a place where you can bet, that sucks. But DraftKings has your back. Huge cash prizes with DraftKings Daily Fantasy Plus. New customers get a free shot at $1 million in total prizes. So download the app right now. Use promo code PFF, bet just $5, get $280 in free bets if any team of your choice wins. Promo code is PFF at DraftKings Sportsbook. You must be 21 or older in Jersey, Indiana, Pennsylvania only. New customers are the ones that are eligible. Minimum $5 deposit, $1 wager required. One per customer. Search supply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Last but not least, another awesome deal for you. As the big game approaches, you probably want a fully catered meal up to $2,500 in value. And you can get that by going to westernsouthern.com/feast. Western Southern Financial, great sponsor of this podcast, helps people just like you and me get your financial future in action. So they could probably help you out with that. But all you have to do to get their help covering your Super Bowl party is to go to westernsouthern.com/feast and ask Chris Collinsworth any question, anything you want. Could be about finance, could be about football, could be about the Bengals being in the Super Bowl, and enter automatically then for a chance to win that awesome catered meal. westernsouthern.com/feast. Go do it now. Okay. Prop bets. You, sir, I want to let the people know. Some people think that you're not, super hip or like into pop culture or anything like that. If anyone doesn't know this, you have beat me to the TikTok game. I think you probably will have that permanently. I'm not sure that's where you're going to find me anytime soon, but you care so much about people capitalizing on the player props that are out there that you've alerted the TikTok world. So what player props are you telling people on TikTok about?
Yeah, I think I'm going to do a prop of the day until this game happens.
I love it.
I'm excited. This is the one I like a lot. I think people are rushing to it because Tampa Bay, Arizona, and then San Francisco have all been good run defenses, very good run defenses, top 10 in the league. And the Bengals are the bottom 10 of the league. Cam Akers, a great story coming off of an Achilles, but has not performed well, right? He's averaged 2.6 yards per carry. Our friend Seth Walder at ESPN, they looked at the yards above expectation. He's averaging less, like almost one full yard below expectation running the football so far. He also dropped his carries from 24 to 13 because he had 2 fumbles against Tampa Bay. Sony Michel went from 1 carry to 10 in the title game. I know he was banged up a little bit, but again, that plays to it. You can get Cam Akers offshore 65.5. It's 62.5 with our friends at DraftKings, 64.5 with our friends at FanDuel. Our player props tool even likes it under 62.5, but I'm going to take Akers under. I would go all the way probably to about 60.5 for under Akers rushing yards in this game, George.
Like it. I love it, actually. In fact, I was talking to Mario Plata, who's a listener to this podcast and is also our injury specialist at PFF. And he was talking about the difference between it being impressive to come back from a torn Achilles and like overall just looking impressive on a football field. So it's like really impressive that Cam Akers is on a football field, period. But the way that he looks on a football field is not particularly impressive. I think that's a really good distinction here. And so you're buying, I think, a lot of that narrative, which is, oh my God, I can't believe he's on the football field. And comparing that to the fact that, yeah, okay, but that's not the end all be all. And so I'll give you another bet that I like, which is Cam Akers under 4.5 receptions in this game.
I like that one too.
It's very similar to your take here. I can't believe this line. He has a combined 5 receptions in the last 3 games that they have played. He has played. He has 1 against Arizona, 3 against Tampa Bay, and 1 against San Francisco. So I'm not sure where that line is coming from, but if you can find it, I would grab it. I would hold on to it for dear life, and I would put a lot of money on that one.
We would make the run. So the cool thing about the PFF props tool, is that you can go in and adjust it for your book. That is what we want you to be able to do. And the under 4.5 there, as George alluded to, minus 120, but we would still see a sizable edge there. If you go to even 3.5 receptions, 3.5 receptions, if you get that at even money, it's still a 1% edge, right? So there's quite a bit to gain from fading Cam Akers in this game. And, you know, again, the Bengals defense has done a great job in limiting a lot of players this postseason. And I think they do a good job here with Akers.
Give me one more prop. I have one more, and then let's get out of here.
We'll go for okay. I'm still going to do this. I know this is square, but I have to. Well, oh man. Yes, I'm going to go with it. Cooper Kupp over 8.5 receptions.
Of course.
I mean, that Cooper Kupp is having, and I said this on the show, and a lot of people try to get mad at me on Monday. Cooper Kupp is having one of the best NFL seasons from a wide receiver in history. But was that yours?
No.
Okay. I think I know what yours is now, and I've already bet it, and the numbers even moved. So I'm happy with that. I am.
One of the things that I really like in this actually is similar to your hypothesis. I'm going to give people two because I'm that kind of guy. Mm-hmm. Your hypothesis in the Kansas City game was spot on. They are going to focus on Jamar Chase, and there's a weakness going from 1 to 2 in the cornerback and the backfield, defensive backfield. That's also true for the Los Angeles Rams. Jalen Ramsey, amazing. Darius Williams not having nearly as good of a season, below 65 PFF grade this year. T. Higgins over 5.5 receptions. I adore it.
That wasn't the one I expected from you, but I also bet that.
But I'm giving you one more, and this is the one you expected from me, which is Joseph Burrow over 11.5 rushing yards.
Yeah,
I'm taking it right now. I'm also just going to say this. I've thought about this a lot. There is no reason to think that the Bengals should win this game. I think you could legitimately say that the Rams have an advantage in literally every facet of the game. So, but I just see it being a close game. And that means that Burrow's going to do some crazy shit. And that means he's going to run for 12 or more yards. So there it is. That's my last player prop. You like that one?
Yeah, I do. I've already bet that. I was on my way back from Indianapolis yesterday from Kansas City through Indianapolis, and I did bet that on the way here.
Awesome. By the way, it is being reported that Kevin O'Connell, Rams offensive coordinator, has emerged as the favorite in Minnesota per Dan Graziano. That is what we will spend all of our time talking about next podcast. And then it'll be announced that he's no longer in the running. So we'll be back on Sunday for you. Of course, no games on Sunday. So we'll probably record that one a little bit earlier in the day than we normally do for all you folks out there. Thank you so much for listening. We love you all. Have a great rest of your week. Peace out.